Okay, so Karisa, welcome to the podcast. This is Keeping Tabs with the Idealist and the Cynic. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is a lot of fun. I am a spiritual practitioner. I'm what I would like to call myself a modern day mystic. My whole life is essentially devoted to contemplation, and that's who I am as a person. So I'm very devoted to spiritual inquiry. I've been on a spiritual path since I was a small kid. I've had a teacher. I have mentors now, and when I was really young, I made this commitment. I was like, I want to see how deep the rabbit hole goes. You know, I wasn't ever interested in what the people around me were telling me was truth, my family. I was like, there's got to be more beneath the surface. So my life has been devoted to peeking beneath the surface of things, you know, going into the dark underbelly of things, looking into the taboo things, the things that are unsaid. And it's led to beautiful, disastrous, wonderful, magical, horrific things. I mean, when you set out on this path and you want to know how deep the rabbit hole goes, you know, you're going to see some stuff. You're going to experience some stuff. And I've experienced some stuff. That's me. That's who I am. That's, you know.
Can you define it back to a moment when you, was there a defining moment in, your spirituality as, a kid? Can you, look back at, something that happened that was, the first time you're like, oh, the things that people are telling me aren't always truthful, or when maybe the first veil had been lifted, because I'm sure there's many along the way of spirituality, right?
Yeah, there's been many. I think I'm kind of like the black sheep of my family. So I'm kind of innately rebellious, right? So if my mom always jokes, if she would tell me, you know, the sky is blue, I would argue with her on that, you know? So there's this innate desire to question things, to almost be like a provoker. I'm kind of like a spiritual provoker. So if I feel something specifically that's harmful for life, ego structures that are harmful for life, I'll poke at it. I poke at things. And you can imagine as a woman walking the world today being a poker, how incredibly interesting my path has been. No one really, there's not many people that I've experienced that really appreciate a woman who pokes at things. You know, you're supposed to be quiet and subservient, and you know, those are kind of the gender roles that I've felt have been placed upon my shoulders. So it's kind of a lonely path as well. And when I was a kid, again, it's like an innate hunger for something, and I never knew what, but I would be drawn to. I'd love to spend time in my room, reading wisdom texts. I really liked Ralph Waldo Emerson when I was a kid, and I would just write. And my favorite hobby as a kid was to to open a book of wisdom, and I would just write down quotes from there. You know, and that was my hobby as a kid. And I loved Buddhism. I was so interested in all religions, and there's just been so many moments where this path has called me. It's not necessarily a comfortable path. So I think one has to deeply be called. You have to be really devoted to this path because it can be very lonely. You know, I don't know many other mystical beings, so it can be very lonely, but I'm very devoted to it and have been my whole life. So yeah.
That's great that you found your calling. And I think that the gender role particularly, is something that just comes with natural progression of society. And where we are now isn't where we need to be, but it's better than the 1300s, it's better than the 1500s, and it will hopefully continue to progress in that direction where you do have more autonomy and ability to speak your truth and have more of an ability to be heard, as you know, in a more credible sense.
Yeah. I think, things have certainly progressed in a way, but there's still I work in the unseen. There's a dark underbelly, I think, that persists of gender ideologies and power and control dynamics. I think, I talk to a lot of my female friends. They sneak into marriages. So you have to be very vigilant, and it's not, so things have improved in a way, but there's still much work to be done.
And it sounds like you're a fighter of that work.
Oh, most certainly.
Right on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And without those fighters, I don't think you see the progress that you see, right? And you continue to see because, you know, your predecessors, the fighters that came before you.
Indeed.
Right. Women's suffrage is 100 years old. We forget about that. We talk about race a lot, but women's rights are fairly new to human society. So it's good to see the fighters to continue to make that progression. And I think we should all be grateful for that.
And I think when you say fighting it, I think you have to be very skillful, because I'm trying to, essentially in my being, I want to feel into these patriarchal structures that are harming life. They harm men, they harm women. They don't allow for a being to be like deeply rooted. They're very disconnected, disembodied power structures that are really harmful. And it's not men, it's not women. Women are worse patriarchs sometimes than men. But there's this warring aspect to patriarchy of everything's divisive, right? It's one way or the other, it's black or white. The more I don't want to say matriarchal, the more feminine path would be both and. It's not this or that, it's both and. So we're finding a middle way and we're bridging it. So to fight it, but in a way that's not like warring against it, is a constant like, how do I dismantle this in a way that promotes love for everybody, love and understanding for everybody, and doesn't contribute to war and divisiveness. So that's a whole thing.
It is, because I think a lot of the time people want to try to get a point across or send a message. They tend to do it in a very antagonistic way that just ends up turning off their target audience, right?
Sure.
They may be preaching to the choir at some moment in time, but by being as aggressive about it as they are, and I've been guilty of this, everybody's guilty of this, why don't you see things my way? And you get so frustrated, you end up turning them to the other side and just like turning them off to your ideas in the first place.
Exactly.
So you have to find that way of integrating peacefully and as conducively to understanding human nature as you possibly can. Because you have to understand that, not everybody's going to see things your way. We spoke about this a little bit before the podcast turned on, like everybody has a different perspective.
Oh, yeah.
We could all look at the exact same thing and see something completely different, just based on our own upbringings and cultural influences and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And this just popped into my mind is the one thing, because I've experienced abusive relationships, all these things that are, and I would try to fight against these power structures. And then from my partner, it would be like pushback and defensiveness and essentially feeling like it was a war. And so in that, if you're not a strong individual, you can very easily get just caught in these terrible dynamics, these warring dynamics. So it really necessitates developing a strong sense of yourself. And so that has been a deepening of my spiritual journey, is because of these abusive dynamics, developing a strong sense of myself so I can show up and say, this is who I am. This is what matters to me. This is my truth. I can assert myself. And when I assert myself, it's not warring. It is a strong, grounded assertion of this is who I am. This is what matters to me. And everybody has to find that for themselves and walk this world, or else you're going to fall for all the propaganda. Everybody's got an opinion, right? But ultimately, it's about perspective, and your perspective is unique to you. And I think every being alive has a different perspective, eyes on a different part of the cosmos, and it creates this full picture, right? And so my perspective may be radically different. Like right now, you're experiencing this moment differently than me, Adam. We're all having a different perspective of this. But in our circle, we're creating a cohesive whole of what's actually going on. So I can develop a sense of myself. I don't need to be pulled by this person's opinion of me or this person's opinion of me. I can develop myself and know that my perspective is not only valid, but it is my birthright to assert, this is who I am, this is what matters to me. My perspective may be different than yours, but it is not, you cannot invalidate it, right? Because I'm strong in myself.
And as somebody who kind of tends to lean towards contrarianism a little bit myself, I can lean into it because I like that it's challenging to other structures, particularly the orthodoxy. Mm-hmm. So, but is there ever a point where you do have to accommodate or make sort of sacrifices in order to, integrate, like you said earlier, integrate your perspective into others? Because by isolating yourself too much, it can be very difficult to then convey the message, right?
I see exactly what you're saying. No, I don't think that I would have to sacrifice that, and I'll tell you why. When you lean into this is who I am. It's not of the ego. It's not something that's detached from life. When you rest into the back body of who you deeply are, you're essentially attuning to your soul, which is the eternal, indwelling, ever, and so that is essentially love, right? So if I'm tuning to myself is essentially walking in love. And that is what heals. That is what speaks out of me. That is what comes from me. That is what's speaking right now. I'm attuned to myself. And then there's this flow. You guys mentioned getting into a flow state. That's essentially just being attuned to the thing. So I think and the deeper I am in myself, I don't need other people to believe me. I don't need other people to agree with me. I'm not reactive. I'm not defensive. What is there to defend? When I am in touch with my heart, I don't have to defend anything. The truth defends itself. So it's really about being aligned with the truth, and sort of like this truth that is at the center, at the backbone of who a person is. And then in that, there's ample room for everyone to be who they are. I would never try to change you or my kids or anybody. You love. It's just love. And there's an openness of perspective where I can hear about your perspective. I don't need it to align with my own. And the more you hold that space for others, it's such a healing presence. I'm really devoted.
Do you think that your self-image, 'cause we create our self-images, right? And you're listening to your inner workings or whatever, but can that ever be harming to what if your self-image is delusional or lacks accountability, especially because we do live in a society, right? Where as much as we're individuals, we also are in this together as friends, family, coworkers, neighbors, just bystanders. Community in general, right? You can remove yourself from community if you really want. You can live a nomadic life where you're off in the woods by yourself or whatever. And that's fine. But I think sometimes I worry about I get what you're saying, that there's not ego, but sometimes it's trying to put this in
the ego is saying that there is no ego almost.
Yeah, it's we all have our idea of who we are, but some people's idea of who they are is very delusional.
Sure, it's not grounded in reality.
And how do you differentiate that? I guess I'm asking, when you're okay, this is who I am and this is who I feel, or this is how I feel. How do I know when I'm teetering on maybe delusional aspects of it, or I want to be this person? I feel more myself when I'm this way, but maybe that's not who I am. I've struggled with that a lot in my life as I've gone through 5-10 year blocks of trying to be somebody I'm not, because I thought that's who I wanted to be. Right. And there's all kinds of reasons for that. There's pressures from family, society, gender roles, whatever it might be. There's these forces at play that can kind of dictate how you feel about yourself. And for me, I think there's importance to try to really find what is the truth amongst that, because I see a lot of people who have these ideas of themselves and it's delusional.
Absolutely.
And you look at it and you go, that's not reality. That's you're living in a different reality than the rest of us. And I don't want to tell sometimes it's should I just be yeah, go off on your delusions? Because that doesn't seem helpful either. Yeah, frolic in the woods and do whatever you think you're doing, even though it's not actually helping you. It's not helping anybody. It's just it can seem delusional at sometimes when I hear people do soul searching. And I've done lots of soul searching. I know Adam's done soul searching. You've obviously done a lot of work. And it's how do you differentiate, or how do you sort of quantify reality from make-believe?
Yeah, that's interesting. A bunch of things came to mind while you were speaking. Firstly, there's this thing where it's feelings aren't facts, right? That's kind of my feelings are totally different than your feelings. And I think a delusion would be to think that everything outside of you was maybe perceiving in the same way as you are, or your idea of things are how things actually are. And that's not at all what I'm saying. There is a consensus reality that we must abide in together, or else I would say what's happening right now on a big scale is a mass delusion. People are grossly disembodied. They're not actually in their bodies. They're living from the neck up.
Absolutely.
It's let's go to space, instead of actually explore the interiority of our own being and our own bodies. So my philosophy is very grounded. And again, going back to being in an abusive relationship, in a dynamic, it's I would have feelings, right? I would be, these are my feelings, you're affecting me. And that person would be no, your feelings are wrong, invalidate, dehumanize, decredit. And that is really painful, because even though, because you have to understand that you can affect others, even if they might not be perceiving the situation the same as you. So my philosophy is very relational and very grounded. And yeah, certainly I think everyone has a sense of self. I didn't say there's no ego. I think you have to have one. It keeps you grounded in the world of beings. I think it's helpful. Everyone has a sense of self. And that's beautiful too, because that's my story of me and my life and my longings and my yearnings and my pain and my joy and my heartache. That's important. That's a treasure for me. That's my life story. And that grounds me into this realm of being, because this earth is of stories. The body is of stories. But I cannot throw this reality on others and say, this is how it is for you. This is how it is for you. My feeling, because that would just be a crossing of a kind of boundary that isn't okay. And then I also wanted to say this. I'm not sure if this ties in or not, but I love this saying, and it's what are you giving the authority to name who you are? Why are you giving conditions, the changing and comings and goings of life, our failings and hardships, which are all part of being human, suffering, struggle, heartache, all part of being human, still don't have the authority to name who I am. I am here at my center. Those are all a part of my reality and aspects of being, but they don't name who I am.
It's not like a label. It's more amorphous and just it is what it is.
Yeah, like even thoughts, like we give thoughts so much credit, but thoughts don't even have the authority to name who I am when I'm at my center. And what I'm essentially speaking of is being attuned to your own center. So instead of reacting to life, like I need conditions to be a certain way to be happy, that's reactivity. I'm responding. When I stay at my center, I'm responding. I'm present. I'm at my center. I'm at my core. And all these conditions are going to happen. Chaos erupts. Somebody, dies. This emergency happens. That's life. But when I'm attuned deeply to my center, is kind of what I'm referring to. I can respond instead of be caught up in reactionary stuff. So the stuff doesn't have the authority to name who I am.
Sure. I actually, from my perspective, I see that almost as reactionary, though. Like putting yourself in a position where, because to me, proactivity is when you are preparing yourself for anything and everything and always being ready at a moment's notice. And by being in tune and centered, you're sort of, if you can be one with the universe without all of the external forces, that's like sounds like an ideal perspective, ideal way of going about life. But because we have these things that happen all the time, and the chaos and the bills and the exes and God knows what else, you end up having to be reactive if you aren't prepared and you haven't been proactive to that point. So to me, by being grounded in a reality, or by being grounded in oneself and not preparing for those things, you are forced upon by reality to be reactive.
Yeah, I think what I'm referring to is my identity isn't bound up in these external things to myself. I'm internally rooted. I have an internal locus of control, right? Because all these things are going to happen, but my identity, my sense of myself is not wrapped up in them. So what I'm referring to is more of like a foundational understanding so I have this foundational understanding. Some people feel it in meditation, right? You're in this state and you feel like this ineffable, unspeakable presence of something come in the space and the silence. That is foundational for the rest of everything. So to attune more deeply to that center, which is not always easy. I have attuned deeply to that center through enormous catastrophe, right? Sometimes you get so bound up in conditions. I give this relationship the power to name who I am. I give this, this working out or not, the power to name who I am, right? I'm either a failure or a winner. Going back to the
that's expectation,
duality.
Right?
Yeah, expectations, sure.
I mean, I know in my life, when I tend to get the most frustrated at things that are happening, it's because they're not going to my expectations.
Right, exactly.
But also, if I just have no expectations throughout life, like...
Do you need expectations?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's expectation, but it's goals, right?
Are goals and expectations the same thing, or are they different?
They flow. Sometimes,
Okay.
I have expectations for myself.
Sure.
Like the quality of life that I want to live.
And what if you don't meet those expectations? What if tomorrow there's a catastrophic emergency that just levels all of that? Would you be okay in yourself?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
And I think that comes through like things like you're talking about, like being grounded and meditation and knowing who you are. But I think there's necessity in preparedness.
What I'm talking about is more living life at the edge. So I'm at the edge. I'm attuning with my body to the moment and what the moment is asking of me. Because if I think I know what this moment requires, I'm a fool. If I think my little sense of myself, know what to do, I'm a freaking fool. Life is flowy. You look at nature. Does nature struggle? Does it have these philosophical conversations, or does it just rise up? There's a perfectly orchestrated thing already happening. So what I'm saying is to drop down into the body. I navigate with my belly. I navigate with my heart. I navigate with the bottoms of my feet, which have more wisdom sometimes than my rational mind. And that is attuning deeply to life, which keeps me grounded, and it keeps me from harming the planet,
would you
others,
refer
and
that
myself.
to that as intuition?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Because there are people who don't enjoy intuition.
Sure. There's people that navigate more rationally, for sure.
Right? Like some people don't, they think it's absolutely silly to ponder deep questions. They think it's a waste of time. And that's actually the majority of the population.
Society.
It's
like 3/4.
And this is all feminine wisdom that I'm talking about that's been lost to the centuries because we're living under patriarchal, this spanning thousands of years. So what I'm talking about is the majority of humans on the earth have lived via what I'm speaking about. We've just forgotten about it. So are the majority of people on board with this? No. Do we have to become on board with this? Yes, because we're destroying the planet and ourselves. And we're destroying our communities. We're just taking from the earth. Everything is dying. And I love life way too much to, go to sleep and live in any other way. So I give my life over to something else again and again. And do I fuck up? Do I mess up? Do I, fail? And do I forget? Yes, that's part of being human. But this devotion inside that says, I know there's something else going on here. And I rest in that. That's the foundational understanding that I'm talking about.
Given the parameters that are inherent in society, the way that we see them today, and there's nothing we can do about it. We can be one with ourselves, but the fact of the matter remains that there are 8 billion people on the planet.
Sure.
Don't logical structures have to be implemented in order to solve the problems? Because we can solve within our own bubble, but if we're talking about like widespread actual like societal change, that's
I don't
going
actually think we can solve the problems with the same level of consciousness that created them. No, I do not. And so what I'm positing is a different. I think consciousness has different shades, and what I'm positing is like a more embodied way of existing. And I think we're all in this together. If one person is walking in this way, it affects everything. We're not individual islands. We're all interconnected so deeply. So if one person decides to walk around in their body with slowness and attunement to their heart, responding to life, listening instead of always thinking, I listen. These are the more feminine, like I'm receiving information via my senses. I receive via intuitive knowing. That's just the wisdom way because the earth is kind of set up for us to operate.
Can your intuition ever lead you awry?
Awry.
Because I think to me, the reason why I can be an intuitive person, it's in my Myers-Briggs. I like to think creatively and abstractly a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. But the reason why I don't lean into that is because I see that it can lead one astray. It's led me astray.
I disagree. If you have a gut feeling about something, and a woman needs to know this, if I'm in the presence of somebody that's making me uncomfortable and I override that, I'm in danger. My life is in danger. So there's some folks walking the planet, and I would say more marginalized, and certainly more than me. I'm speaking from a place of privilege, and I'll own that. I'm talking about more marginalized societies. Like it's essential because there's deception around every corner. Everybody wants you to buy into. There's cult leaders who are dangerous. It's just a reality that people are dangerous right now. So if I'm not attuned to my gut feeling, I walk into a place, my tummy is like, oh, I don't know. I better fucking listen to that. And I don't think that's going to lead me astray because that's my self-protection. That's protection for myself. So to me, it's been essential.
You've mentioned catastrophe being, on several occasions, being like what has sort of helped you identify who you are.
Yeah.
Is that a reaction to the catastrophe, or is it okay?
Well, see, I asked this, brought up intuition because I rely very much on my intuition. Most of my decision making comes from my intuitive feelings, but also some of my intuition stems from trauma. So when I feel negative about a situation I'm in, it's because I'm associating it with a trauma, and that's not always the case. Where like not everything somebody does, if it makes me uncomfortable, is that person is bad. Sometimes it's like, it kind of looks like this thing that I've seen before that hurt me. So now I'm like putting up a wall and I'm going to be avoidant. or something
Right.
when I don't, that's not necessarily the best way to go about it.
Right.
And I trust my gut. Like if I'm in a situation, generally speaking, especially as a poker player, like there's times when I make a decision on a poker table and I'm analytical as can be. Everything is numbers and math, but every once in a while there's just something that says some things doesn't match up. I don't know what it is, and I just go with my gut, whatever that means. And I operate a lot of my life like that. But I think there needs to be a place for logic. And when you talk about like there being somebody around every corner, cult leaders, people trying to swindle you, you've got tons of information coming in. Sometimes I think it's more important to have like critical thinking, which involves logic. It can't just be all intuition, because to really decipher this information, you need to have like critical thinking skills, which requires like data and analysis and logic. And I think intuition is part of that. And there's probably a good reason why 70% of the population that exists doesn't rely on their intuition, right? But there's probably needs to be intuition too. And there's people that you need mystics, right? Mystics have existed throughout pretty much any culture ever. As far back in time, there's always been a shaman or something. So you need those people, I think, for our spiritual sides, but also you need logisticians. What is that word?
Logisticians.
Logisticians. You need logisticians and you need data analysis. I mean, because without that, I guess a question I could ask you is, what do you think the perfect society looks like?
Yeah, I want to say to you that I never said critical thinking wasn't a thing. I think
No,
people
I
are
didn't.
dangerously disembodied as a whole. And I think being out of touch with the body is dangerous for life. It's dangerous for me. It's dangerous for women. It's dangerous for children. It's dangerous for one another. So to posit that we should go about without that in some ways, I don't think that's necessarily helpful. But yeah, critical thinking for sure is absolutely important. And I wasn't positing that that's not necessary, because I think the intuition arises. The logic must be a servant to the intuition rather than
Do you think there's a way to logic why your intuition is telling you something?
No.
Like, do you
Nope.
ever think
Absolutely
that
not.
like, 'cause sometimes I look at my intuition and I'm like, oh, I was right about that. And I'm like, that was a gut feeling. But sometimes have I just got so efficient at taking in information that like I'm not even realizing how it's coming in and why I got this feeling, but there was other factors at play, right? Like maybe my intuition told me not to trust this person, but was it because of something they said? Like sometimes it's just your gut, but like maybe there was multiple things that happened, because so much of interactions is like people are white noise, right? And then all of a sudden enough of that white noise like resonates and you go, oh, something, this person's been talking for a while, and like you just get little clips of like, oh, that's something's off here, something's off there. And so sometimes I wonder if intuition is just logic, but you're not seeing how you got to the result.
Yeah, I think intuition comes from the body, right? The body is always present. The body is always grounded in the present moment. The mind can be forward, backward, up, down, left, right. The body is always grounded in reality. So we want to talk about making changes in reality. What I'm positing is literally making the most change in touch with reality, not a delusional, I'm in the past, I'm in the future, right? This is what I'm talking about, is the most embodied, grounded path, because the body is always present. And the mind comes after these arisings that come up from the body. This is the most in touch with the environment possible. And it's also very self-protective. So it doesn't matter if you're in a situation that reminds you of, if I'm in a situation that reminds me of past abuse, and let's say this person isn't abusive, I'm going to take measures to protect myself regardless.
You should.
I don't need to think, oh, maybe, is that just trauma? That's dangerous for me.
Well, we have very different. I tend to be very forgiving of people and give them benefits of the doubt before they necessarily deserve them. As where Adam, he's going to be much more skeptical of people.
Sure.
He's going to start probably neutral and then lean skeptical quickly, as where I'll start neutral and then lean towards like forgiveness, or I give people passes when I shouldn't. And that's a fault of mine that I've been trying to be more assertive as I get older. And I know this about myself. I'm like, this is why.
That's why we're still friends.
But
I had a lot of years that were real bad. Anyway, sorry.
No, I just, I guess I wanted to get back to what you think like a perfect society would look like. Because we have this conversation a lot, right? And it makes a lot of sense for us to be more close to the earth, tribal, smaller groups. But there is 8 billion of us, and that's not the reality we live in. And it's not going to happen anytime soon. We're not going to get less people on the planet. If anything, we're going to have more people.
Yeah, and I like to make decisions because my whole life goal is to be an elder, a wise elder for the younger generations. And an elder would make a decision thinking of 7 generations down the line. So every decision I make, I understand that it's going to have a trickle effect for not just me, but my children, their children, and on and on. So the choices I'm making, am I making them with the future generations in mind? My life, okay, it's, it has an expiration date. I want to devote myself to making sure that these decisions do have an impact. And none of us right now are exempt from the web of culpability and the way things are. Things are just kind of a mess. And I don't like to spend time, what is the word? Idealizing. I don't like to get, in the perfect world. That's more like thinking of heaven, like the perfect situation. I like to deal with realities that are happening now. And this is, again, being attuned to the truth. Right now, in this moment, in this body, is the only way I'm going to be able to make an impact, really. So what is here right now that needs my attention? What are my relationships like? What's happening in my body? This is how we will all make those changes. But we can't leave into fantasy of the ideal world, heaven, nirvana, that's so disembodied still. We can have ideas of course, I want 7 generations down the line. I hope my, the rivers are cleaned up. I hope the air is more, breathable. I really hope these things will happen, and I pray every day. But every decision I make, whether it's handling my own intergenerational trauma, things that I've inherited, my own karma, from my mother, and, I'm working through these things every day. So to my children, I'm passing on a slightly lighter load, and on and on and on. And we will not get to see the fruition of this. We're just not going to get to see this better world. But I know in my bones it's coming. I will say that. I can feel it quite acutely. But we will not get to see like this. We're just going to have to deal with the mess. We're kind of the mess. We're kind of navigating trauma. Everybody's on a healing journey, right? And it's all beautiful. We're sort of clearing all of this karma and trauma and things, and clearing the way for, handing it off to my kids and be like, you'll do better than me. So yeah.
Well put. Yeah. No, I agree with you, and I like that perspective a lot. I think that one thing that we need to be wary of as a society, from my perspective, are people that will seize to capitalize on other people's traumas and sort of, act as if they're acting on behalf of them, but it's not actually in good faith. I think you see a lot of that out there. It's just disingenuous people that are grifters, as I like to call them, charlatans, right? I think it's cool to just want to be grounded and really teach people. And I think that your perspective is badly needed in society in many aspects.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me here to bring forth this feminine perspective, because I think it's really important for the power structures and other structures to listen to more marginal. I'm not saying I'm marginalized. I'm coming from a place of privilege, but my perspective is certainly in the margins, at the moment. So to make space for these sort of wisdom pieces to come forth, I appreciate you having me here and listening, because that's really important. So, yeah.
Do you think it's hard for people that are extremely marginalized and disenfranchised, who don't grow up on love and grow up on survival? I find it hard to preach some loving ideologies on those people, because they don't know what that even is, right? They've grown up I don't know where my food's coming from. I'm just trying not to get beat or hurt, or I'm just trying to survive. Every single day is a day of survival.
Yes.
And sometimes it's easy, because we do come from a place of privilege, to be just meditate and be calm
and stop polluting, when 950 million people in Africa, 1 billion plus in India, and 1 billion plus in China are reliant on those manufactories that pollute horrifically and destroy the planet in order for them to have some decent way of life.
These are realities we have to deal with right now. Yeah, and that love isn't an ideology. It's just love.
No, it is, but it's to just love yourself more and pick yourself up. It's hard cruel. Okay.
I like to I always spend time with folks, wayward folks. I don't see anybody on the term of caliber or whatever. I just love, and it's just that presence itself, just the willingness to meet somebody on a human level and be like, hey, I see you. I'm not afraid of your darkness. I'm not afraid of suffering. I'm just going to meet you here. I'm going to sit with you in the dirt. That's So yeah, it's not like an ideology. It would be so cruel and thoughtless and dehumanizing and disembodied from reality to go to somebody who's, struggling with poverty and all these things that folks.
I guess that's where I'm like, how do you get to those people? How do you give those people meaning to their life and get to feel the joys of love and purpose and being grounded when there is no ground? There's not even a floor. There's no basement. Like, there's just lower and lower they go.
Right.
And it's like, how do you connect with those people from a privileged place? Like, because like, I want to help those people, right? And I just don't know, like, if having this conversation with somebody who lives in such deplorable conditions, it doesn't resonate. I don't know if it even resonates with them. If, like, if you heard what we're talking about, and there's people, I agree with you, first of all. And I'm just trying, how do we bridge the gap there? How do you get to those people? How do you make those people feel like they're deserving of love? I mean, obviously by loving them, but it's like, it just, I don't know where the tool, how you help those people. And that's where I get caught up and I get sometimes cynical, because it's just like how do you reach these?
I think, we want to move mountains and change the world, I think, sometimes before we've really done the deep work in ourselves. And I think that's where it starts, because let's say there is no difference between the inside and the outside, right? So every little bit of work we do inside and in our own lives does have a ripple effect. And because we are in a place of privilege, it's really important to boost marginalized voices. So to step down and really boost those that are voiceless, to stand up. I'm very, very fierce. So maybe I'm a being of love, but I'm a freaking warrior. And I will show up again and again. I will not kill a fly or an ant. I show up to help I'm not saying that I'm some like great saint, but this is an extension of my care. If there's something in front of me that needs my help or that needs my attention, I'm there. And I think that's actually a really big thing. It seems so small, like just take care of your life, take care of your moments, take care of your people, get outside, get familiar with your backyard, learn the plants, learn the creatures that inhabit your backyard. Like really, those are all things we can do to familiarize ourselves with a wider landscape of beings, which is not just people. People are not the only things struggling, right? The whole earth is struggling, beings are struggling. And we, I think, sometimes go about our day like, here's my life, this is my story, all of this stuff is scenery to my story, rather than like all of this stuff is a part of my extended body. So I'm going to get out in my backyard, I'm going to learn the landscape, I'm going to go sit with the trees because there's wisdom the land has wisdom, It's very arrogant for humans to think we have to change things when every being on this planet, including the earth herself, has wisdom to share. And that's not fantasy. That is learning that what we think is voiceless is actually not voiceless. We've just forgotten how to listen. So there are remedies available just by listening, by not thinking, and I'm going to go figure out life, I'm going to figure out how to save the world. That's a freaking arrogant illusion, man. It's arrogant to think that we can change the world. Ultimately, that is the highest truth, is a paradox. The highest truth is paradoxical, so it is both and. It's never either or. So the systems we're living under that have influenced our perceptions are this either or. So what I'm kind of talking is the both and. So it's not dividing like the realms of thinking. You guys keep kind of going back to thinking like I'm positing thinking is a bad thing, which I'm not. It's bridging the two, because a lot of people, most people I would say, are dangerously disembodied. They're not walking with their ground, their feet actually connected to the ground. There's no consciousness awakened in their body, and you can awaken the consciousness in your feet and your toes and your belly. All of these things are wisdom.
I think you need a balance between feeling and intuition and thinking and logic, because telling a kid who's in the slums of Detroit to go hug a tree and his life will get better is fucking asinine, right? And like, yes, like, would he benefit from being in nature to an extent? Probably. He's going to feel a little bit better, but going into the woods isn't going to solve his problem of not having positive role models in his life and not having food on the table and not having options, and his school systems are failing. And like, as much as I love nature, like I just moved from the mountains back to the city and I hate it. Like I miss living in the mountains and having a river in my backyard that I get to enjoy every day. Now I enjoy, homeless guys pissing on the sidewalk. It's, so much different, but it also like, I kind of need to see that, because
that's reality.
Me living in the mountains is good for me, but it detaches me from a reality that most people live in. And so I think it's important to have spirituality and have tools like meditation and mindfulness and gratitude, but it's just really hard to tell somebody who's got it so shitty to just, hey, be grateful that you could have it worse. It's like, how much worse can it get, buddy?
Yeah, I think what you're maybe referring to, and I could be wrong, is like this love and light perspective that is not grounded in the body. What I'm referring to is maybe like a divinity that is human. Being spiritual is not different than just walking down the street, seeing a homeless guy pissing, who's also God, right? The homeless guy pissing is God. The trash on the sidewalk is God. The sky, the person yelling, it's all that. And so to come down deep into the human experience, and if I see somebody struggling, of course I'm going to reach out to care. But to think that there's these people that out there that we have to help, it's like that's so, if we have not done the inner work ourselves, if we're not in touch with the ground beneath our feet, I think that's an idyllic illusion that prevents like a deeper groundedness in earth, which is reality. I'm walking in my body. I'm actually attuned to the environment. I'm attuned to who needs what. This is the mother. I'm a mother, right? So my path is I have to be attuned to what others want. Intuition is caretaking, and it's so undervalued, right? Attuning to the moment, I can, attune to what everybody needs and what those around me need, and it really allows me to come out of my smaller sense of myself, to be available for what life is doing, but to think I need to go save the world, or these people that we think are struggling, I think that's, of course that's a noble thing, but you then go to Detroit and, go work with folks, go be a mentor. Those are actionable steps you can take, those are actionable things that ground you, and it's no different than spirituality. Meditation isn't the only part of spirituality. It is foundational, I feel like, sometimes to have that. And I do this work so that I can show up strongly, because I know a lot of people in my life who are struggling, who are scared, who are confused. So I do my work so I can at least show up strong. I don't give myself excuses.
I don't know one person who isn't struggling, scared, or confused currently.
There's a lot of that.
I don't know. I'm not. I'm pretty fucking perfect everywhere.
Right.
Everything feels good.
Crushing it. Yeah, it's great. I feel no anxiety, no stress, no depression.
Oh yeah, to be a human, it's messy. It is, and none of this is being checked out from being scared, confused, suffering. It's really getting into the belly of it. My favorite moments of my life when I've tasted the most spirituality has been in the pit of sorrow, in the pit of depression, when I've been leveled, bloodied, there's been horrible, that's when the divine, I've felt the most spirit, not being like up and detached. It's been in the ground.
That was the catastrophe I was referring to earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't think often it seems like the point of life is to be happy and joyful, and I don't think that's the point at all. I think that's a optimistic way of thinking, but you have to have, like, if it wasn't for adversity, like, I would have no progress, right? Like, if everything, some people don't have to face adversity because they're born into really exceptional circumstances, but even people from a place of privilege still face like hardships, and grief and loss is ubiquitous amongst everybody, right?
That's right.
That doesn't, nobody's
exempt from the human condition, not even millionaires.
It doesn't
you
matter.
can have $1 million and you're still going to face loss, death, sorrow, heartache, grief,
Decay. Yeah.
Decay. You're going to fall apart. You got an expiration date, so you can't take your $1 million with you. You can't take your car with you. You can't take, so what is actually important?
I don't know. I might get shot to space in my Tesla with my $1 million.
Oh, okay.
After I've integrated with AI, and so I can live forever, immortal. Immortality, baby.
Yeah.
Me, I don't want to be around forever. Dealing with me, it's a lot. I don't think that the idea of like being with me, Karisa, forever. It's like, I want to be something else. I want to do something else.
But now, do you think
the ancestral lineage, sort of that you sort of hint at, like, do we live forever? Like, you know what I mean? It's like maybe we are immortal.
Recycled. I was just talking to my daughter about this. Like, we like to look at like roadkill in the road because it's a perfect moment. I'm like, hey guys, look, so there's bugs that are eating all of this stuff, and this flesh is now getting into the bugs, and the bugs are going to get into the soil, and they're going to become the plants, and it's all just recycled and regenerated. Our ancestors are literally in our cells and our body. Like, your body is an ancestor, right? So we think we got to go figure out life. Meanwhile, our ancestors, who is like, we've been through this before, and worse than you've got it now. Can you please begin to listen to what we have to say? And that's very real. this whole body has been around for, well, ever, right? This is all just recycled material.
See, but like this is where the integration I think can work really well, and we can reconcile our two perspectives a little bit, because everything's grounded in the earth and reality. But my perspective, and it's so cool that you have that perspective, because my perspective is that we're all made of star stuff. Because before the earth,
Exactly.
you know what I mean?
Totally. It's not different.
So yeah,
We're all stars. I mean,
totally.
this is a star. I mean, everything in the cosmos, it's not just Earth. It's everything. I look up at the stars and I see them as ancestors, truly, who have wisdom if I listen. So this, again, goes into the intuitive realm. And it's actually imaginal. It's thinking. It's sometimes downloads like of information just happen randomly. And it comes as a picture in your mind or a feeling. This is where creativity happens. And to be attuned to that, so like inwardly listening, there's so much wisdom we can glean from everything, whether it's truly the stars or the bottoms of your feet. Just like walk and just really listen to what the feet are doing. And I mean, there's so much wisdom available.
Totally.
Do you view technology, especially artificial intelligence, as a threat to the human condition, as a threat to spirituality? Is it something that can integrate and make it better? Is it something that makes us inherently less human and more? Because I wonder about that, right? Because biologically, evolution happens because we want to evolve and perpetuate the species. And is AI that next step, right? It's like, well, okay, like we have these biological constraints. What if we can remove some of the biological constraints?
And what if we make Earth uninhabitable to the point where you almost have to integrate, because that looks like the trajectory we're headed on.
Like a Matrix type situation, which is like not ideal, right? But is that...
That's where the patriarchy is leading us, is that way. But I completely do not feel that's going to happen. And again, this is a knowing in my bones. I think we're headed toward a matriarchy. I've talked to lots of elders and other wisdom keepers, and we all kind of are unanimous that a matriarchy is coming. And once the matriarchy has passed its point, it'll come to a balance point between both things. But I think we are headed toward a matriarchy 100%. And matriarchal cultures are always communal, grounded in the earth, very mythological. You know, we start telling these stories again that uplift the human soul. It's mutual caretaking. It's a circle rather than a line. And in that circle, everything is included. Right?
Have we seen matriarchies in like widespread societies?
The majority of human civilization up until the last, 2005, however many years, has been matriarchal. Yes, goddess honoring.
So how do you undo the last 2,000 years, right? Where we've just completely undone all of that.
Well, it starts right where I am.
Well, do you think it cycles? Does it go matriarchal to patriarchal to matriarchal?
And I would consider this to be like what the Kali Yuga, like one of the dark ages. This is not even close to like the beautiful loveliness of, you know, what's possible for humanity, right? This is just gross. We're all disconnected, we're isolated, we're disembodied, we're miserable, we're lonely. You know, these types of things are not natural to the human spirit or the human organism. That's why everything is just so ugh.
Well, but that's why I guess that's what I was getting at with like artificial intelligence and social media, right?
Because that's the trajectory. Like how do you undo that trajectory?
Because are you going to get people to put their phones down? No.
But you know, no.
Are you going to get people to get off of social media? I do too. I much prefer that. Like I think the 90s were much better than things are currently, right? Because it's like we had technology, but we were using it just to like better ourselves. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't social media where now we're narcissistic and isolated and...
Yeah, and I would actually say that narcissism is sometimes necessary in order to individuate. We have to become kind of self-fixated for a while to remove ourselves from groupthink, you know, our family lines. It's sort of necessary. And I actually read something the other day about this. Narcissism is actually healthy up to an extent because it helps you kind of attune more deeply. It's kind of self-serving.
Well, because narcissism is, it can be confused with confidence. Right, like
that's like fake confidence, like arrogance, just like an outward display.
Right, like I think sometimes narcissism isn't the right word that we use for a lot of stuff.
Sure.
Because narcissism to me has more of like people who are really narcissistic, they're unable to see themselves within the context of like reality.
That's
a little
exactly
bit.
Right.
They're just very delusional about who they are.
Exactly right.
Right? Because there's a difference between being confident and being narcissistic. And confidence is good, and you do have to love yourself. And like to properly grieve and heal, you have to go inside and kind of be selfish to tend to your own wounds. Exactly. Because if you don't, like, you're just going to end up perpetuating cyclical nonsense of bad relationships and bad healing strategies. And the word narcissism gets under my skin a lot because I just think it's
overused.
like it's overused and saturated. Same with like gaslighting.
Yeah, when they get overused, they just lose their meaning. So
Exact-
it's helpful to unpack it like you are.
And I think it's important to differentiate the difference between like narcissism and it's a spectrum. Everybody has their narcissistic tendencies, you know, and then you get too far and then, you know, you become irredeemable at some points. I
And
think.
harmful to others.
Absolutely.
Indeed, very harmful.
Every single person sitting in this room and anybody who's listening to this has come across a narcissist.
Indeed.
And they know how that feels.
It's devastating.
Yeah.
And that's this out of touch.
Because it makes you question your own self-worth and your own,
That's
like, am I
exactly-
fucking
Sanity.
insane?
That's what
Yeah.
I've experienced. So this indeed was my doorway. Being in, with a narcissist was my doorway into having to develop a sense of self because it's so manipulative and they prey on the most innocent part of a human being, which is our heart, our trusting nature,
Yes,
our desire for connection. So it's never anybody's fault if they encounter a narcissist, right? It's the narcissist is manipulative. They know what they're doing. They prey on the innocence of human beings. And it is kind of psychopathic. And these people know what they're doing. They're not like us sitting in this room having these lovely self-reflective conversations. They don't self-reflect. This is a part of what, this is a real thing, and it's something we have to deal with. But again, it helped me to develop a sense of myself because they try to rob you of that.
I don't know if I think there are some narcissists that are walking around that aren't self-aware, that can become self-aware. And sometimes I don't know if they know what they're doing. Sometimes I think it's a defense mechanism, right?
Oh,
Because
indeed. It is, of course.
they had such a traumatic childhood or some traumatic events that have happened where they've gone into this like
Self-preservation.
survival mode, right? And then like this is how I'm going to protect myself is like by using some like it's fucked up, but I don't think they're like I don't think when narcissists enter relationships, they're always like, I cannot wait to destroy this person.
Some people do.
I mean, maybe they do. I don't know. We're
Not all of them.
It's
not all of them.
and I think it's on a spectrum, right? You have people that are going to be just extremely narcissistic that are probably just like, I can't wait to get this person and destroy them. And I guess do they get joy from it?
So I
Not
actually want to
really.
circle back around to what I was talking about developing a sense of self. I think narcissists are dangerously, they don't have a sense of self.
None.
So they need you and your energy and your admiration and your time in order to feel something. They're kind of dead inside sometimes. And the narcissist I encountered it wasn't a result of trauma at all. It was the result of being a tall, good-looking white male with privilege who's always had, given everything he wants, just all the admiration because he's tall and good-looking, right? So these things are created he didn't develop a sense of himself because when people just laud you for just existing, you just, fine, I'll just exist. I'll just be tall and good-looking. You don't develop your inner being. So I think it's really again,
That's how the female narcissists come about too, right? They're
sure.
very good looking. Like when
Yeah.
people are like, oh, people are so nice to me. It's like, yeah, because you're really good looking. Like,
Yeah.
it's
And they
like-
leverage it into being,
Right.
yeah.
and they
Yeah.
sometimes they don't mean to, right? It's like that's a product of society. Sometimes, like, why are we idolizing these people just because their standard of beauty is what we have deemed the most beautiful?
Right. It's just a shallow. It's
Like why when I look at
shallowness.
celebrities and celebrity culture, I'm like, why do we look up to so many of these people? I think there are good celebrities and there are people out there we should look up to, but like just because somebody's good looking and can sing doesn't mean that their opinions matter.
So this is the thing. It's like when we're not in touch with our inner world, right? We externalize these figures onto celebrities. So if I can watch this singer, I don't have to actually go inside and like find my inner singer, my inner artist. So I put it onto somebody else. And that essentially is, I don't know if that's narcissism. I'll have to go back and think about this. But when you're not in touch with your own gifts and your own inner being, you will externalize things that you're not in touch with onto others. And that can spiral into abuse, right? If I am not in touch with my own, inner feminine or whatever, I'm going to find a woman who will do the emotional labor for me because I am not in touch with mine, so they can just do it for me. I'm not in touch with my own whatever, so I'll just give it to them to do it for me. But that's really dangerous. And it doesn't, it's everybody's birthright to, find out who they are. So, and I would really love to spiral back around to what you said about just not knowing what's going to come next with AI, because that keeps coming up. So what I want to say about this is, I think there's something to the dark night of the soul, which is you're in I think, since COVID and maybe even who knows, since when, but since COVID especially, we've all been plunged into a sea of unknowability, right? Everything we thought was the case is no longer the case. Systems are falling, conditions are different. During COVID, people are dying suddenly. Everybody's, sick or panicked or just don't know what to do, or there's all these divisions. And so we're like really in this space of unknowing. It's like the darkness, but really this is the darkness that precedes creation. And we are not the ultimate creators, so just to make that abundantly clear. I don't make my heart beat. I don't make my stomach digest. I don't have to think to breathe. I don't have to, it's a self-regulating thing.
System, yeah.
And my little rational mind or whatever, such a small little sliver, there's a force more powerful than me, and that's just so. So I surrender myself to that again and again. And I don't have to know where things are going, and I don't know where things are going. But that I don't know is really powerful. And if we can really come to rest deeply, and I don't know, that leaves an opening for something to naturally and organically emerge in everybody. And it doesn't even have to be everyone. If even a slight percentage of people are making way for this deeper intelligence to emerge, it's going to make waves.
See, my propensity to tend towards preparedness and proactivity is what leads me to want to try to figure out when shit inevitably does hit the fan, how will I then be able to respond?
I think you should be prepared. I don't know how the apocalypse is. So what I talk about this every day. Are things going to get riotous? Are things going to get, because everything is falling apart. Patriarchy is 100% falling apart. The systems as we know them are totally falling apart, because I feel into this underbelly of what's going on, the down below, and things are they're quaking, they're falling apart. What is that going to look like? Things have already been falling apart. Everything as we've known it since 2020 there's already been so much change, and precipitated by online. So being able to be connected with others has facilitated like this mass awakening. We can all communicate, we can all chat. Most people are, online. We can all have these ideas and co-create. So it's really beautiful. But I think it is good to be prepared, because I'm not panicked, but I don't know what the falling apart is going to totally look like, but it has to fall apart, and it is. So I think you're brilliant and wise for being prepared. Totally. It would be foolish not to be prepared.
Well, thank you for feeding my narcissism. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
But you can also
smart.
only you can prepare for whatever, but like if the power grid goes down, like I'm not prepared for that. I don't know how to,
No.
I mean, that's, the people who are prepared for that are going to be the scary people. Like
Yeah.
Your militia, your,
When society devolves, there's not going to be a lot that people like us are going to be able to do.
archaic type of civilization. That's scary. I don't even know if I want to be around for the apocalypse.
Yeah. It's
I hope whatever happens, if there's an initial wave, I want to be gone then.
Yeah.
And then I don't want to. And then when the dust settles, the rest of the people can figure it out. I'd like to just,
I think I'm good.
Whatever's
well
next.
before the dust ever. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to deal with the dust settling. I
Instantaneous
want to
stuff.
be gone with the dust. I want to be the dust.
It's indeed.
But that's kind of, I'm so sorry, but that's kind of why I feel like AI can be, and obviously it's going to be used for evil. It's just, we're humans. We tend towards evil things. But I think that if you can integrate with AI such that you don't have to feel pain or suffering, and you can kind of mitigate a lot of the more detrimental aspects of human nature and humanity.
Do you think we're inherently evil, and then we learn to
I wanted to talk on that too.
are we inherently evil, and then we learn to mitigate it?
I mean, look at human history.
Or are we inherently good,
Only in the
and
last,
then we use...
however many years, but there's been many peaceful civilizations, especially matriarchal ones.
But a lot of them got conquered by the neighboring tribe that was evil and said, "Oh, they're peaceful. I'm going to go crush them and take their women and their children." And it's horrific stuff. But humans are tough. Humans are rough creatures.
They are tough.
And it's like why did the evil, more aggressive genetics sort of prevail, right? Because your passive, matriarchal, loving ones, while those were great for the people involved, the other societies just, if you have a powerful, patriarchal, aggressive group neighboring you, they're just going to take that, right? And it's how do you... I mean, it's survival of the fittest, right? Sometimes, and even in groups, the stronger group will survive. And I'm not saying that the patriarchy is better or anything. It's just why have we shifted to that? Why did we? Was it just one bad seed that happened, and then that bad seed perpetuated? Like Genghis Khan, bad seed, and then he went and.
And I tend to, my cynicism tends to believe that that's kind of just where humans will go when society, we've gotten to the civilized society, and there is a lot that could be done better, and a lot that we've gone astray.
I think that's why people like shows like The Last of Us so much, right?
Totally.
Because
It's like what happens when we are at our base instinct. In my cynical mind, it's horrific. It's like there are the pure souls and the people that are going to be able to.
But those aren't the ones that are going to prevail in an apocalyptic setting.
And maybe
it's
they
going to
do,
be the killers.
but, yeah.
Maybe eventually, right?
Sure.
If they hide or they play the game for a little while and then
That's where strategy comes into play, right? That's where like preparedness.
it's like I want to be out in the woods when that happens, right? But like fuck, the people that make it out of the city that get to the woods, those are going to be the most savage ones because it's savagery that's going to get you through those times, you know?
Or elusiveness, but I mean, you have to be very elusive.
Yeah,
But,
and I mean that the elusive ones will already be in the woods, right? But eventually the people are going to run out of stuff here and they want to. I mean, it's.
Again, we don't know. You know, it's
Hopefully it doesn't come to that.
breathtaking.
Hopefully that
I
never
don't
happens.
know.
But
Right.
sometimes it feels like doom is impending.
Indeed,
currently.
and that's why.
But it's also that's a narrative I feel like that's pushed on us because we want fearful. It's much easier to control a fearful society than an awoke and enlightened, loving society, right? People that use lots of. I mean, that's why they were afraid of LSD back in the day. It's
Yep.
just, oh, these people
Yep.
are thinking outside the box and challenging these structures we've put into place. We don't like that.
They found
That drug
out that-
illegal. Get that out of here.
They ran the studies, found out that they couldn't control people's minds, and in fact, it did the exact opposite.
Yeah,
and
made
they're
them
like,
more
"We need
lucid."
to ban this immediately."
Yeah,
and they did.
This is a threat to.
I mean, that was the motivation behind the banning of psychedelics, particularly LSD specifically, because of the counterculture movement.
Because you say that there's forces like I breathe on my own.
Right, exactly.
My heart beats on its own. Like I'm not doing that. Like
Yeah, I repeat to myself all the time, it's thy will, not thine. Because there is a force larger than myself at work at all times that can take my life tomorrow. I might have all these hopes and dreams and aspirations. Tomorrow I get sick. Somebody dies. That's a force much greater than myself. So I kneel myself before that. Anytime I get too big in my britches and I'm strutting around thinking I know stuff, I've got all these ambitions, that's when the rug is pulled out from beneath me and I wind up flat on my face. Because life is saying, I'm bigger than you. Let me take care of you. Stop trying to figure out life on your own. You can't do it. You've not done it so far. You can't figure out how to think your heart. You can't figure out how to think your way into like making your, it really is like a self-regulating organism. And there is this nature, you look at, it's like that feeling when you're standing and you're looking at like the enormity of the ocean, like that feeling you get of how small you actually are. There's wisdom there. I don't want to be big. I want to be really small. Not only is it safer there, but in that humility of being truly humbling myself in the face of something greater is important.
I agree completely. I think there's a good balance that could be found, right? Like, I think that submitting yourself completely and wholly is sort of like kind of defeatism a little bit. Like, oh, I can't do anything about it, therefore. But then you also don't want to have the arrogance and the ego to be like, I can control it all. Everything's mine. Like, I think there's a balance that needs to be found somewhere.
I mean, that's like the Stoicism, right? That's what the Stoics believed. It's like there's things that you can control those, and the rest you can't. So focus on
What's the
things that you
divinity
can.
prayer?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm so sorry. So we just got.
Oh yeah, I guess back to do you have free will, and how much of your life is your free will and just the playing out of physics?
Gosh, I think we're all on a karmic path for sure, kind of bound to the past, and that's you can't get out of that. I inevitably am carrying things that were my mother's and her mother's and her mother's and her, and there's just and that becomes my dharma, right? Your karma becomes your dharma. So your path of working with what you've been given.
What's the difference between dharma and karma?
Karma is like the, I almost think of it like the structure of your body. It's sort of like the karmic, it's like things you've inherited. It's things that are not just the result of like past choices. It could be consequences, but it's more just like, okay, here's what I've been given. I've got this trauma from being a kid, or, I've inherited my anxiety from my mother or whatever. So it's really, and then your dharma would be like, okay, here's what I've got. I'm going to be honest with myself. I'm not going to delude myself into thinking I need to go be perfect.
So do you
or
think
whatever.
karma is archetypical?
Archetypal?
Yeah.
Like what do you mean?
I mean, the archetypes basically are the idea that we are who we are. You were going to be a certain way just based upon your genetic predispositions. right? Like there's some people that are just born with this archetype.
Your ancestors
Well-
sucked, so your life is gonna suck.
Yeah, no,
Sort
but,
of,
but that's
right?
where your dharma comes into play.
Sure.
Because it's like, no, I'm going to take all the things I've been given and I'm going to work with it. I'm going to love it. I'm going to be tender with it. I'm going to do what I can with what I've been given. I'm going to be honest with myself in the moment. And I think all of our lives follow an archetypal pattern, inevitably, right? So archetype is kind of like the base structure of the psyche of a human being. And that's just so. And we all kind of follow archetypal patterns if you look at like Star Wars and just like the hero's journey. And those are all things we move through on our path of individuation and coming to know who we are more deeply. So your dharma sometimes can follow this archetypal. You know, you leave home, you got to, experience all these obstacles, all these stresses. Maybe you meet a mentor, somebody to help you, and then eventually you make your way back home.
I guess, what is your perspective on purpose?
I think it's tied in with your dharma. I mean, even though we the idea of free will, it gets kind of philosophical, but I do believe we were all born with a purpose. I think that we all have an innate something that is a brilliance or a gift or a strength or, a specific wound we have come to carry in this life. We've been wounded. Everyone's been wounded. Now, out of that woundedness, do you now have gifts to offer others? Wisdom, compassion, empathy. So all of this is, tying into the idea of dharma. And I think when you're on your dharma path, which is, I guess, destiny, and it's always here in this moment, really, it's really, you feel it. It's kind of like it's a river of nutrition. I'm thinking of this metaphorically because I'm just seeing it as an image, but it's like a river of nutrition that you follow that feels like a yes, and it feels aligned. I can get into a flow state when I do this. It comes naturally I may have to work at it, of course, but there's an innate quality of yes to it.
Yeah, those feelings in life are my favorite, and sometimes they come very unexpectedly, but you're like, oh, this is right. Like I've sort of had this awakening in Austin lately. It's like my first time, like I've really been in a city, and I've tried to move to other cities, and it's the first time I'm like, oh, this feels right. This feels like there's all sorts of reasons. Some of it could be me, like self-fulfilling prophecies, right? Like I want it to work out or whatever, but there's sometimes this feeling of just like, oh, this is right. Or like, oh, this is that thing I was missing somewhere else. I'm like, and I can't even put exactly what it is, but there's just something there that feels, I can feel very drawn to it, and I want to explore it more. But I don't know if it's going to be forever or ephemeral. I don't know, but I know that my gut and my intuition says, hey, being there is right. And putting your energy into the things that you're doing there are making you happy. And it came out of despair, came out of a bad breakup that kind of eventually put me there. But I already kind of like thought I wanted to go there. And then I was like, okay, well now I can, and heartache is like hilarious because it's terrible, but like, fuck, it can be so motivating sometimes. I think some people, it has the opposite effect. Like we have a good friend who his heartache has really gotten the best of him. And it's like, fuck, like it's sad to see that, but I use it as fuel, right? Like you process it and it's sad and you get your grieving period, but then you have to make a decision to like be better than that grief or to ascend from it or whatever it is that you need to do to get back on whatever your path is. And, paths aren't always straight and narrow.
Straight.
They wind and circle. And
Yes, they do.
it's crazy, but it is fun to have that feeling when you're like, oh yes, like this, you don't know why or what it is, but you're like, I'm on the right path.
Right. Yeah, it's a palpable feeling. And again, I think from my journey, I've found it important to always be attuned to the moment and be willing to give up anything the moment the path is. And sometimes the path just falls out. You think, oh, Austin is the way. I'm not, it sounds like it's great, and it is. Like for me personally, I think this is the way. And then all of a sudden, like something happens and it's like, oh, okay, well now life is asking me to shift. So to be kind of flexible with that too. And then also, I think a lot of people are seeking, they're very hungry, like maybe for purpose, but maybe just like a quick fix to satisfy this longing, which really is a longing for purpose, for God, whatever you want to say, this longing to be united with something we feel we're missing. You can easily go toward, God, sex, drugs, booze,
Dopamine,
right?
anything but dopamine.
Let me just cover up this feeling of want.
That was alcohol for me for the longest time. It was
Sure.
like, that's where I went to find that feeling that I wasn't getting elsewhere. And it's crazy how once you let that go or realize what it was that you were running from or hiding from or masking.
And I think it's called spirits for a reason. I think everybody they're seeking their spirit, they're seeking spirit, they're seeking meaning.
But it's crazy how often you can feel like, oh, this is the right path. And then also like I've been on the wrong path and you're like, this isn't good. I'm on the wrong path. And sometimes you can't get off that path. And that's like scary. Because a lot of with alcohol. There was a long time where I drank. I'm like, dude, this isn't good. This isn't what you are. This isn't who you are. Like, what are you doing? But you just continue to do it because you're depressed or confused or it's easier. A lot of times
of what you're gonna find after you
that's
quit
like
the alcohol,
scary.
because the alcohol gives you like a cop out. Right, it's like, oh, okay, I was drunk, and then it's like, shit, if I quit, then I don't have any more excuses.
Dude, that was
now
my
it's
thing.
full blown accountability.
Yep.
Wow.
And you really have to peel back the layers, and
That's big.
It's kind of what happened. Like when
Well, that's why I think
first
a lot
got
of people
sober.
they get sober for a little while, and they're like, well, my life's not that much better. Like I quit drinking and things didn't get better. And it's like, dude, it's like drinking doesn't make your problems go away. It just makes them a little bit more clear. And for me, it was just like, oh, okay, like let's tackle this problem and then get that out of the way. And it's sort of like just continue to remove things from your life. Like alcohol was first, like get rid of that. And then it's like, oh, okay, well, there's also some really negative people in my life. And I kind of have to navigate those relationships and then my relationship with myself. And then you really have to ask yourself, like, why do I have this job that I have? That was a big thing for me is like I was doing what I thought I wanted to do, but it was also what was kind of easy. And then when I got sober, I was like, oh my God, I don't like any part of my life. Like this entire thing is like a construct that I made that isn't one that I'm finding any fulfillment or happiness in.
Yeah.
And that's big though.
That's huge.
Because then you're like, fuck, like the road to purpose is like, that's not an easy one.
Absolutely. No, if it was, everybody would
Exactly.
be doing it.
Like, you're like,
if it was easy, every single human would be doing it. It takes immense courage. So that's what I was thinking about you. Just you have such a a strong soul, I guess, for lack of a better words, to say it poetically, because to rise above, and that's like an archetypal journey for humans, to get out of distraction and addiction and compulsion and our lower animal natures, and to, bridge that with consciousness is not easy. So there's always these temptations on the path wanting to pull you off. You're on the path of individuation. Here's something shiny over here that wants to tempt you and pull you off your path. And this is the human journey of individuation, rising above these addictions or, whatever. And it is not easy, especially right now in this time.
well, and
And being able to differentiate which shiny objects are good and which ones are not, right?
Right, because
sometimes
also-
you're like, oh my God, I'm going to go down this path. And you're just like, what the fuck? I thought this was going to be, like this felt right.
So much of life
And then
is
the other
trial and
side,
error.
You're just like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to go down that path, but like, maybe it's a good one to go down. So it's like, yeah, trial and error.
and then
It's
also
huge.
like
Yeah.
learning that, okay, I drank because of like impulsivity, but impulsivity isn't always bad.
No.
Right? Like sometimes being able to make quick decisions is like I live life
your
that
asset.
requires
Yeah.
lots of quick decisions all the time.
True.
And for me, that's where I thrive, is when my back's against the wall. Like that's when like something good's about that.
How it's going to come through.
And it's fucking scary because having your back against the wall is not fun. But if I get too complacent and things are too easy and I don't challenge myself and put myself into situations that require me to kind of rise above, I get bored, and that's when I get self-destructive. But also, like, you have to make sure it's a fine line. And like, if what I'm doing is putting myself in this situation, is this self-destruction or is this like growth? Like, what is happening?
I want to say something on this because I think that more for lack of a better word, more soulful folks who are really on this path, life can be boring because it's not very imaginative. It's not very much fun. You go to work, you got all these serious faces around you, and it's like, God, I just want to feel something. So myself, I have a very addictive personality. So I love to go toward these things that are like fun and shiny.
Oh, I
because
see.
can
I'm a
feel
pleasure
very-
seeker.
Right. And there's something in that because you want to explore the bounds, which is your birthright, to explore the bounds of your imagination and your being. And life can feel so routine and structured and everybody's boring. And life is, I feel that all the time. So yeah, to make sure you feed that appetite in a healthy way is always like a learning curve there. Because, yeah.
I sometimes, ignorance is bliss. Sometimes you look at people who just are NPCs, whatever you want to call them, cookie cutter. And it's like, is that better? Is that easier than like doing fucking deep soul searching all the time, because deep soul searching isn't easy.
No,
it's
not.
fucking
It seems
painful,
like being
and it's
an
existential dread.
Yeah.
Like sometimes
It is.
because you're just constantly like, what is the meaning of this? Like, what is the deeper thing here? And then there's some people that are just like, I don't want to think that thought. I don't need to dive deep into it. Like, I go to work and I make money, and then I have a family and I raise my kids.
You know what's interesting about personalities though is like even like within the smaller demographic of the intuitives, right? The 26%, 24% of population that are the N's in the Myers-Briggs that tend to have these like deeper thinking sort of like ideas that can sometimes be a little fantastical, but they're necessary. Is like the differentiation between like that becomes like an existential sort of threat sometimes, or it can make you the gigantic nature of it, right? There's a word I'm thinking of, I can't think of it. But anyway, just the enormity of it, right, can get to you and can get to you sometimes. I think your personality types tend to be a little bit like, fuck, that's a lot. Mine, I embrace that. Like, I love the enormity of these. Like, when I'm in my mind thinking about all of these huge ideas, so even like within our demographic, it splits a little bit, because when I'm thinking of these huge ideas, I'm like, neat. Like, how, and like I am trying to just like think like, fuck it, how do you solve this? Like, oh, is this a problem? Is this a solution? And so it can be, it can appear stupid, but like I thoroughly enjoy it, and it's just so much fun to me. But
It is, but it
I have
also,
something to say.
Sure.
Just to touch on your point, because I think if everybody, like you are so, what actually popped into my mind, I'll just tell you because it's not mine, it's now yours. You're a magician. You are like an alchemical, to me, you embody the archetype of magician. And anyway, that's a side note, but I feel like if everybody is truly coming forward with the gifts that are their brilliance, so maybe it's you problem solving, me it's intuition, you it's whatever. If everybody in the community was just leaning into the gifts that they have to offer, and it doesn't have to change their job, their situation may not change, but if you just come forward with the gifts you innately have to offer, that's how the communities thrive. Because we did come here just as like the tree has a function, everything has a function.
well, yeah, and
We
there's
each have
group
a function.
dynamics. There's a reason there's comedians, right?
Yeah.
Is because like in dire times there was like the warriors, right? But amongst those dire times, like there's probably still some guy cracking jokes,
Right,
on the
exactly.
side, because
And
like,
that's
and that was necessary
brilliant.
because he was like, hey, I'm not gonna go to war and kill a bunch of people, but when you guys come back, at least I can lighten the mood.
That's right.
Right,
a
and that's
beautiful
so
gift.
fucking necessary.
And when I say, gifts and purpose, we think it's like maybe some grand dazzling thing, but like it could also just be like you're a spectacular listener, or you're just empathetic, or you have these great ideas. I mean, that could very well be a purpose too. It's not just like I can like build a cathedral. It's like, no, just you come forward with what you innately are good at. And if everybody did that, yeah.
Oh no, I couldn't agree with you more, but like, I think, because in my mind, I'm like, well, then why is there toxicity? It's because I think people like have strengths and weaknesses, right? And if we all leaned into our strengths, we would have this beautiful society. But the problem is we have these weaknesses,
keeps
we
us
have these
humble.
traumas, and it ends up crushing us and the people around us and communities and society as a whole. But if we could all just lean into the strengths, right? Like, I'm not good at being adaptive or resourceful or impulsive or spontaneous as you are, right? But if I lean into my strengths and like try to incorporate some of that, the beauty of that into my life, and just do it to the best of my ability while I'm not inflicting pain and sorrow and chaos onto society, then I think I am then being the best version of myself for the society as a whole.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, because sometimes you need to lean into the experience, right? Because
Totally.
you can get caught up in the process so much to where you're always like, okay, do all these steps, because I know if I do these steps, more than likely I will hit this goal because the steps are very well planned, and you've done step-by-step processes before, you're good at it. But then it's like, but what about the journey, right? And I tend to be too much on the journey, where I'm like, every experience is more important, but then sometimes the destination gets so far distorted because I didn't do any planning, and now I'm in these like spots. And so the older I get, the more I'm learning to like, okay, like it's okay to have some foresight and plan a little bit. I'm never going to be the guy who plans weeks and months and years in advance, but like I can start to like save money and make sure, like even just taking care of yourself is like planning for the future, right?
And even though that's never going to be a strength of yours, being able to incorporate it to the best of your ability in a healthy way, so it's not compromising yourself or who you are fundamentally, is going to be a net asset for you and everybody around you, because you're living a healthier life, I feel.
And there may be somebody who can teach you to do those things.
Well,
Right? This is
totally.
how we're
That's why
benefit
me and
to each
Adam
other.
Very
had such a
complimentary.
good friendship is
Yeah.
because
That's right.
you know, he's able to be like, hey dude, fucking plan.
And that's the beauty of connection and intimacy
Like-
and friendship and communities. We help each other out, you know, because if you're weak on like something, then I can come forward with my strength and vice versa.
Absolutely.
And then we lift each other up.
Have you ever seen the study that was done where they give kids a marshmallow? Have you ever seen this study?
I don't think so.
So they give a kid a marshmallow and they put it in front of him. They go, I'm going to leave the room. You're welcome to have this marshmallow as soon as I leave. But if you wait till I come back, I'm going to give you 2 marshmallows.
Mm-hmm.
Are you the type to wait for 2 marshmallows, or are you going to eat that one marshmallow right there? And
Gosh. Yeah, I think I'd wait. I don't know. I think I'd wait. It depends on how hungry I was.
see, because Adam, he's always waiting.
Right.
Since I was like 4 years
And
old,
the
I'm like,
fact
well,
that-
duh, I'm gonna have to. But like,
And he
he's
can't even
completely different.
he can't even comprehend that like somebody would. He's like, why would you not wait for 2? As
But-
where I would have already eaten the marshmallow, and I'd
Yeah.
probably be trying the crayons to see if those were like, you know, like, are these good too?
And then he's like has a hard time like fathoming like why I would wait. It's just like you just do it. You just like. But
Well,
then
also, I
the
would-
more we talk about it and the more we complement each other's like ways of thinking, the more we can understand like why the other person would have that perspective.
And I'm also very optimistic, where I'm like, well, I'm gonna eat this marshmallow, and maybe I can convince them to give me the other marshmallow anyways.
Oh, I like that.
Now I get it. Now I
like
get it. Now
that.
I get to have my marshmallow now, and I might still get that marshmallow.
with impulsivity and spontaneity comes resourcefulness
Yeah.
and adaptivity for sure. Yeah.
But it's very funny. I think
Lovely.
I think when they did the study on the kids, it's like 85% of the kids just eat the marshmallow.
Wow.
Very few kids are able to. But the study was a long-term study, and most of the kids who waited ended up being much more kind of successful in life.
Interesting.
But obviously, success is a metric that's like, what is successful, right?
Exactly. We could unpack that forever. But
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
So it just kind of shows you that like planning is good, but also like most people don't.
And
Very
you,
well.
and like as somebody who likes to plan a lot, like it's not all fucking cookies and rainbows. Like it can be, you get lost in the process,
Well,
right? And then you realize like 10 years have passed and you're just still living in the same apartment, which I'm not, by the way. And then you're just like, what the fuck is like? Where did the time go? I was so focused on the
Well,
process and the end goal that I lost sight of the journey. And so he, he helps me
It
with
feels
that.
like it could be a cage sometimes.
Yeah.
Like that sort of structure, like being so structured and so organized can often be like, for me, that's like, it is a threat to me. I'm like, oh, that's
the
like, you're going
same.
to put the bird in the cage, the bird's going to die.
Yep.
For
But you're
sure.
like, but hey, if I'm in the cage, the predators can't get in. The cage is pretty nice. It's got food. It's got water. I know when, like, I you can see both sides of the coin.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, different strokes for different folks. So it's a matter of the imposition of the ideas and your perspective. Like you don't need to impose anything on. You can try to offer your ideas to somebody else, but if nobody wants to hear you, then like we're going to broadcast this to the world. And if nobody wants to hear us, then we're just screaming into the void. But like, hopefully people, it resonates and people understand like, oh, these conversations should be had and people should understand different perspectives and the
I think
same
people are scared to
perspectives
have
and
discourse.
integrate them and fucking differentiate them and
Because
everything.
it's much easier to go into your echo chamber,
Yeah.
and where everybody agrees with you and you're praised for your perspective and your opinion, even if it's not always right. There's needs balance, and everything is so divided. It's very scary. And
And so I think, yes.
I guess I was trying to think of like, I think like a lot of what you see now, right, is like feminism kind of rising and like the matriarch trying to like gain control again. I don't know if it's like that's like the right way to phrase it, but it's hard when you say things like patriarch and matriarch, because I think a lot of men, when they hear like down with the patriarch, it's like, it sometimes feels like men are the problem, right? And
It's
like,
an immediate amygdala response, and it's going to turn a lot of people off to the topic and the point that you're trying to make. Not with us, we're good.
Which is
got you. But
problematic
like,
in and of itself.
It is,
Some
and-
people are embarrassed to even call themselves feminists because of so it's the patriarchal structure.
But I also think that there are feminists who don't really understand like what patriarchy is at its finest, and they see it as like, oh, it's men that are the problem, and it's like, it's not necessarily men, it's like the institutions that are created. It's not like men aren't not always the problem, because you have to have men, right? Like you have to have men, and you have to have masculine energies, and you have to have like men to do things that like like Jordan Peterson always talks about how, you know, like, who do you think builds these buildings that we're in? Like, it's not, women aren't building them, right? That's like 99% men, like, in those fields. Not that women can't, but
Just physical labor.
I would like to insert my opinion in feminism, if I might.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Since I'm the female in the group who've experienced, women. I just want to ask both of you, are either of you afraid to walk down the street alone?
Yeah, sometimes. Absolutely.
Okay. So,
But
Sure.
not probably as much as a woman.
okay. Yeah. So our experience, men commit the most, murders, rapes, atrocities. So men do have things to atone for. And what I have found in my own, so do women, of course we do. But really the conversation is on the power imbalances, which are very real and very present and affect not only marginalized folks, but women and, more so. And I think it's important for men to be open to hearing these perspectives as not an attack. And patriarchy exists inside of all of us. It's a power structure that is.
Well, that's what I was kind of
harmful.
alluding to, is I think that on both sides, when you hear like these sort of conversations, men feel attacked, right? Like, it's you guys,
definitely,
like, you're the
they
problem.
do.
Like, cause like lately, that's all I've been hearing is like how men have ruined everything.
And I think it's important for
And
you
it's like, did I ruin everything?
It's why why can't you receive somebody telling you they're hurt? If somebody's been hurt by life or by men, and we say something, and men are like, well, not all men, or not me, or they're defensive or reactive. More often than not, folks, I've experienced this with men. You're hurting me. Ouch! Stop it! Don't. And they are so like, what? You're attacking me. It's like, I need you to hear me. I need to be received. More often than not, folks are just looking to be witnessed. And I think it's important to really be able to witness people in their pain, because men have committed great atrocities. So have women, but not to the scale that men do and still currently do. But patriarchy exists inside of everyone. And I know women who are far worse patriarchs than men. They uphold it. They tear down other women, jealousy amongst women. It's like you tear her down, you keep her small, you keep her silent. That is a thing, that even exists inside family structures. Mothers trying to keep their daughters weak, submissive, so these are, so these systems exist in all of us. And I think it's everybody's responsibility to do the work of dismantling them inside first. So how do we police our own thought? How do we, all of these ways that patriarchy shows up can happen inside of our own being. How do I think I'm more powerful than the ant or the squirrel? How do I think I've got some superiority over the earth, right? These are all patriarchal structures that are harmful. And I think we can all do the work of looking at them and hopefully be receptive to folks telling you if you're hurting them. Even if it's not true for you, maybe it's true for them.
Of course. And I can see how women it's tough to be. I saw like somebody was telling me about like a blog that I was like, hey, if men didn't exist for a day, what would the first thing you would do? And a lot of women like go outside for a walk.
Yeah.
Because I can't do that safely, or like I don't feel safe doing that.
Yeah.
And that's sad. I don't want to see. I mean, I was raised by women, so I have like a very feminine energy in myself because I was raised by strong, like independent women. Mm-hmm. I feel like I understand the female plight a little more than some men, just because I was immersed in it for so long, and like these are people I love and look up to. So it was very easy for me to like empathize with them. And a lot of men just don't have that. Mm-hmm. And then but I feel bad for some men too, because there's a lot of lonely guys out there that don't want to be lonely.
Yeah.
But society has kind of cast them aside because dating is hard, really hard now for a lot of young people, I think. Mm-hmm. Like, we're lucky that we grew up in an age where we weren't on social media constantly. Right? Like, we had to interact, and like these young people now, like there's more and more young men mm-hmm. saying that they don't even have friends. Like, they don't have a best friend. They don't have a friend.
Yeah.
Like 50% of kids are saying this. Like, that is so sad to me.
Yeah, it is.
And it's just like, I don't, it's terrible that men lash out, but it's just like, fuck. Like, sometimes like these people aren't being heard or witnessed either. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, men sometimes are very marginalized, and it sucks because as a man, there's not a lot of like places to go, safe spaces to talk about your emotions at all. Like,
absolutely.
I'm lucky that I have people in my life I can, but like a lot of dudes probably just don't have anybody they can turn to and be like, dude, I don't feel good inside. It's like, suck it up.
And then they get online and they start lashing out, and then they end up with these patriarchal sort of like ideologies that are very toxic. And I think that it's because a lot of the time, not always, but a lot of the time, it's because they were never heard and nobody is listening to them. Again, not to absolve any guilt at all. But yeah, I think that's one perspective for sure.
Yeah, patriarchy is harming everyone, and it's not just, harming women. It harms everyone, and that hurts my heart. That hurts my soul because, again, I love men. It's not that I don't hate men under any circumstances. I see their potential as beings. I see my own potential, and I just want to feel safe. I want to, walking around. I want to be able to be heard and received. When we say, "Hey, you're hurting me," or "Hey, don't, knock down that tree, please." Like that hurts me. That hurts my body. That hurts my being. So just the willingness to listen and be receptive, and. Yeah, we're just not living in a way that is conducive to health and happiness for anyone. And that's really sad.
People are much more isolated, and
Yes.
the experience is much more like self-centered,
Yeah.
seems to be now.
Totally.
So, like
Totally.
it's shared, but like we just go into our phones and our
Yeah.
realities that we create that aren't necessarily true, right? Like your online persona is not always perfectly attuned with who you are.
That's very true. It really can't be. I think it's like an avatar. It's a representation of
Yeah.
yourself. And
You
saw the
get
video
to
I
pick
showed
and,
you,
you get
right?
to
Where-
pick and choose which parts you show.
Progress.
I always hate when people are like, God, you shouldn't talk about politics or religion. And I'm like, I feel like you should be talking about those things. Those things almost seem more important than how is the weather.
As soon
and
as things
did the
become taboo,
Cubs win today.
Right. As soon as things become taboo, like it becomes this, it either becomes,
And it's because that's you're gonna get an
Toxic.
that's the fear, right? Is if we have these conversations, it's going to become defensive and toxic. But it doesn't have to be.
right.
Practice helps. Like empathy helps. Like putting yourself in these conversations with different people from all kinds of different backgrounds and ideologies and perspectives, and trying to just like have conversations and eventually find some sort of cohesion amongst the different personalities and cultures. And I just think long discussions with people are so important, and we just don't really have that. It seems to be, I don't know, have we ever had that? I don't know. I guess we did we? I don't know what it was like in the
And I feel like this is how we can use, because it feels like it's like with the advent of technology, because before in communities, it was just between one and another. You couldn't necessarily broadcast it. And I think a lot of the time, people use technology as a bane to existence, right? Rather than an asset. And I think that's the difference is what we're trying to do. All of this technology and all of this like bullshit and the money that you pour into something like a project like this it's self-serving, and it strokes your ego a little bit, but we want it to be a force for good, truly, fundamentally. We discuss this at length.
yeah, and I have something to add also. The ideas are important. I mean, some of my own realizations have been sparked by, wisdom words coming from somebody's mouth, and it's like, oh, that rings true. And then you feel into that yourself. Like with this podcast, we want folks to feel into what we're saying for themselves. Nothing we're saying is God's word. We're just bringing forth ideas. Take what resonates, get rid of the rest. And I think it's really important to have these words that, and then also I want to say something too, and we're trying to find a place of relating and unitedness and intimacy. I don't know if we find that through ideas. I think we find that through actually the ways we suffer, because nobody may relate to me saying, oh, I'm a mystic, I have experiences of God when I look at a tree. People will be like, what the fuck are you talking about? But when I say I fucking suffered today, I had grief that came and sat in my belly for 30 minutes, heavily, and then I had it, acutely all day, and people are like, I know, I feel that. I'm saying I got a heart, my heart was broken, I'm going through a divorce, my heart is broken. People are like, I know exactly what it feels like to have a broken heart. That's how we relate, is through our human condition. So if we all stop trying to pretend like we're perfect, this is the reaching for ideals, or, it starts in the Bible of being like, hide these other parts of yourself, be righteous, be wholesome, be good, right? So we think we have to be perfect or reach for this goodness, but really the good stuff is in the ways that we suffer. Because that's just to be human, because we are aware of our death, we lose people we care about, there's a lot going on, and everybody can relate to that, whether you're a millionaire or living on the street. We can all relate to feeling a broken heart, or feeling anxiety, or being depressed. And
I think suffering is because it's inevitable. Like we should all, I think, learn how to best deal with it in any way that we have the capacity to. A lot of the time, suffering leads us to bad outcomes, and I've done this. I did this, like, I masked a lot of my suffering through alcohol, right? And I think if we can figure out how to transform that suffering into growth, like, what did I learn here? I fucked up. Something went wrong. How do I figure this out? And I think that's where ideas can sort of reconcile.
Well, that's beautiful. What you're saying is we have to know and feel and believe, because it's true, I think, that our suffering is not meaningless. If we suffer and we think, oh, I'm, just alone on this floating rock in this vast universe that's kind of a biological accident, it's going to be really fucking hard to sit with your grief. You're probably going to wanna. You're going to be like, this shit sucks. I'm broken. This is bad. I'm wrong. How do I've been here myself in the depths of sorrow, wanting to, not be around anymore. This is the plight of being a deeply feeling person. But at the minute you start to feel maybe your suffering is not meaningless, but there's more going on here than just we're on this dead rock floating through space, that maybe there is something here. And then to turn your suffering into something good is possible, because some of the most brilliant beauty comes out of the depths of suffering. I write my best poetry when I'm freaking in the thick of sorrow.
We talked about that last time we
the thick of it, because it's alive. You got like these feelings, and you can, when you write your poetry, it's an alive.
If I sit down and play guitar when I'm having a good day, it's just like happy day. I put it down. It's like a 10-minute thing. If I'm sad, I will play that guitar for 4 days straight. So
out of suffering comes enormous creativity, is what you're saying. Creativity, and that could benefit the world at large right now, right? To really get into the bottom of the bottom of the bottom of our sorrow, not brace against it, not feel like it's an accident, but really relax into the belly of confusion. I'm fucking confused. I'm scared. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. Just rest there, and there is actually such creativity and wisdom and beauty that can come from that place of brokenness.
Agreed. There are
cracks.
And tangentially related, there are enough resources in this world at this point, the way that we've innovated, to be able to provide for everybody and give everybody a basic floor. The problem is a lot of the resources are being hoarded at the very tippy top of society. But the goal, I think, should be to, there's an amazing quote. I forget who says it, but he basically says, I have to study warfare and this and that so that my sons may study architecture and this so that their sons may study music and painting. And it's this like progression of things that you have to do. And we've gotten to a point, that motherfucking camera
died again.
And I'll finish this with this thought real quick.
You keep talking.
And so it's that progression of things, and we now have been able to harness resources, and yes, we've destroyed the planet in the process, but we have a way of providing a basic floor for everybody. And if we can do it in a more sustainable way, and we can make people not have to think about how they're going to forage for food or how they're going to do this like very difficult, tedious task that consumes all of their time and energy, then we can have more time to allocate to the arts and creativity. And so, we come at it from a different perspective, but I think, the ultimate goal is one and the same, is that we do want everybody to just live like lives where everybody can be happy and creative and not have the earth, completely destroyed and decimated in the process.
So I think there's this deeply rooted mythological structure, because humans are mythological beings, of this story it influences our perception like glasses, coming all the way from the Bible, right? That says that everything on earth is essentially for the humans' taking. So there's people that have taken this understanding who genuinely feel that there's beings that are less than them, right? So these people on top who are hoarding, they genuinely, I think, may believe on some level, even if it's mythologically or subconsciously, that they are better and more deserving than other beings. And there's like all the way at the bottom of the chain of animals, like who cares about them? This is me. This is my story. So it's the hero of in the front and center, the individual's journey. And that mythological structure is so deeply rooted in folks. So I think beginning to tell new stories is important. Like what we're doing here, we're weaving new stories into the landscape.
And that almost like that one turned off.
Did it?
Yeah.
The
Karisa's. But
that one's not plugged in, so it probably just died.
Okay.
We've been talking for a long time.
We'll go for a second longer, and then we'll wrap it up, just because all of our machines are dying on us. But I was just sorry. I was gonna say that. This is a good point. I thought, what were we talking about?
Dying and being.
Suffrage. So I think like where suffering can promote growth, and often does, and I like to think of my suffering as being conducive to becoming a better person than I was yesterday. alcohol, and like especially with my form of it, was like a forced suffering. And I feel like that's where we need to be careful, is are we forcing ourselves to suffer in cases that we don't need to, right?
Yeah, we do. That's
seeking
kind of the thing.
growth or
yeah,
something
you have
like
this
that.
impulse to
Yeah.
force these types of
Well,
inciting
masochism, right?
incidences.
Like
I think it's really innate. I think if our culture is not holding us through an initiation rite of childhood to adult, there's so many different ones. Whether you're, going, marrying, there's so many different initiations that something in you will actually force it to come about. And that just seems to be true from everything I've gathered. From a mystical perspective, there's absolutely something in us that life will force the initiation, and it may not be in pretty ways. So we can be attuned to our own need. Wow, I'm feeling depressed. I'm feeling like shitty about my life. Maybe something is asking to die. Something new is asking to be reborn.
Well, just look at your own growth. Like there's childhood, right? And then there's like adolescence.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like, I remember when I was like 22, 23, I was like, I know, I'm so happy. I used to refer to myself as a man and an adult all the time. And I look back at that person, I'm like, oh, you little child, look at you pretending to be, you thought you were an adult, and it's like, I had these, I was still, I was much more adolescent than I was adult. Like, I think alcohol contributed to a lot of my
Hubris.
and also the inability to mature. I think alcohol stunted my maturity. Like I've matured way more in the last 5 years. Some of that is probably, a lot of that is sobriety, but some of it is also like you just get older and you just start to see things differently. Mm-hmm. I think they call it like your Saturn moon. Like that's what the astrologists call it, right? That's like your middle age sort of. I could be wrong. All the astrologers out there are probably like, fucking
This guy's
idiot.
so dumb.
It's Jupiter's moon, you idiot. It's not Saturn's moon, you fucking moron. But I think it's something like that. Please, if anybody's watching this, tell us what I'm wrong about. But there's just like you're constantly coming of age. It's not just like coming of age. It's like, yeah, you're coming of age from adolescence into young adulthood, from young adulthood into middle life.
And I think that's
middle
really,
age.
it's important to remember that death is so intimately interwoven with life, right? I think sometimes we forget that. Like there's only one final end to the death, but really death is every moment. Like this right now is the future's past. Like this moment is just about to die and birth into the next one. So it's so intimately interwoven, and to just be aware of the cycles. This is where the feminine part comes in of, I understand cycles because I'm a feminine being. So I understand that the death, birth, life cycle is, the death, life, death cycle is very important and integrated into my being.
Right on.
Anything you want to say before we
Yes.
wrap this up?
I feel like we covered so
We did.
many
We talked
different-
for
So
a
I
long
hope
time.
there's like some cohesion here, because there was a lot that opened up. No, thank you for having me. Thank you for allowing me to bring forth my perspective. And it's been really nice talking with you.